So here are 8 reasons why I think Christians, especially Protestants, should be unashamedly celebrating Charlie Kirk's life and legacy. Number 1, he preached the gospel. We know that. There's so many proofs of that. There's so many videos of that. And Romans 10:15 is saying something like, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. That is something to be celebrated. Anyone who is preaching the good news and making that effort is deserving of that praise. Those feet are beautiful. That action is worthy in God's eyes. Number 2 would be he defended the unborn right away. He was the biggest, the most powerful Christian debater and the protector of the unborn. And I followed many others personally. Jeff Durbin comes to mind and many others. Layla Rose, I believe her last name is. But he was going directly in the lion's den, and that was his big thing, not anything like any other conservative, primarily and really because of his Christian convictions. That's how he would justify it. So he defended the unborn. In Proverbs 24:11 says, rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. Number 3, he defended the family. Most likely the most direct, most kind of specific reason and motive of the killer. And that's because Charlie Kirk was talking very clearly about what the family is and what the family looks like. Trans issue is anti-biblical. And even though a couple years ago, maybe about 6 years ago, from what I've seen, he did have some questions about the gay marriage, which was surprising to some believers. At least for me it was, to find out that he was kind of still deciding on where he stands on the gay marriage issue. And but just his last debate in Cambridge, just literally 3 months ago, I think it was, he was very boldly standing on the Matthew 19 specifically. It was not some sociological or scientific or anything else, as doesn't mean that it's not a good argument, but he specifically was using Matthew 19 as the reason why gay marriage is not a thing. It's not biblical. And of course, all the other perversions are anti-biblical. So he defended the family, which is fundamental to Christianity, to Christian teaching. It's right in the beginning. It's right there in the very first few chapters of Genesis. Number 4, he called people to read their Bibles. He was very specific about that. Anytime you watch his videos, he's calling men, women, girls, guys to go and open the Bible and start reading it every day faithfully so that God would speak to you and open your eyes to the things that they don't see, they don't understand. So that's been always something that stood out to me as his call back to the Bible and not so much just being stuck on the philosophy. Number 5, he called people to join biblical churches. Church is a non-negotiable. Local Bible-believing church is a must for anyone who wants to grow. And he did that very often from my experience of watching his debates on campuses. His wife did that 2 days after he was murdered. She's speaking to the nation and tens of millions of people are watching her, and she's saying, go find a biblical church. That is something absolutely amazing and to be celebrated for sure. Number 6, he called men to be selfless leaders and providers. That is very key, especially nowadays in our society where, toxic masculinity is the doctrine of the colleges, and femininity is celebrated, or feminism, so to speak. It's not femininity. Femininity deserves to be celebrated, but not feminism. And even his wife, again in that video, she said one of his favorite verses was Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That was his source for that conviction, Bible itself. So it wasn't just some sociological or some study. It is the general revelation in the Bible that he used as a justification for these convictions. And he called guys and men often to not be lazy, to work, to get married, to have many kids. 1 Timothy 5:8 talking about go and earn money and go be productive, go provide for your family, don't be lazy. That's all, Christianity applied, ethics applied, morality applied based on Christianity and the Bible. Number 7, he was a courageous yet loving example. Courageous yet loving example. It reminds me of the 1 Corinthians, 16:13-14, where Paul is saying, act like men, be strong. How do you act like men, right? And there's many different personalities, but you cannot deny his courage. You cannot deny a manly behavior when you see one, and going straight into the fire, into the epicenter of anti-biblical ideas, of anti-Christian ideologies, straight into the campuses, to places where they're born, where they're being propagated and spread. That just, what's more manlier than that? Of course, there's many other things that are also manly. Discipling your kids at home is manly. Leading your wife is manly. Praying is manly. Other things. But this example was very manly, and reminded me of Paul, talking to the unbelievers in Athens, just being bold and consistent and yet loving and patient and willing to reason, willing to listen, willing to disagree in a very loving way, but without compromising the truth. Number 8, and that's probably the biggest one, he was a martyr. He was a martyr. And that's my conviction. I've watched many of his debates, and that's just very obvious. It's too obvious to ignore it. And Christians, they celebrate their martyrs, and we should. Philippians 2:28-30. You remember when Paul is talking to Philippians about Epaphroditus, he's saying, so receive him in the Lord with all joy and honor such men as Epaphroditus, for he nearly died for the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was lacking in your service to me. This person almost died, and Paul is saying he deserves a special kind of honor. And that's what we see across all of the Bible. We see the people who die for the gospel, preaching of the gospel, very clearly proclaiming that Jesus is Lord, who is going to judge living and the dead, who was risen from the dead. To do that, he said that literally a few minutes before he was shot. He was preaching the gospel. So in my mind, he was definitely a gospel preaching Christian who deserves praise. He died like a martyr, especially looking at the person who killed him and the motives behind. Hate speech is always related to moral issues and almost exclusively related to Christian source, to biblical moral standards. It's very hard to, just like in the first century, you were not killed for saying that Jesus is the Savior. You were killed for saying that Jesus is Lord, and he is your Lord, and he's the only Lord, and you need to obey him and live a life consistent with the gospel, consistent with the King, consistent with his kingdom's ethics and morals. That's why people were murdered. In the first, second, third, century, people were not killed for just purely saying Jesus is a Savior or he is a Lord. No, he's the Lord, and you need to change your life. Applied ethics and morality is the reason why people were murdered all the time. He reminds me of somebody, maybe from the Bible. Stephen comes to mind. He was preaching directly to the idolatry of the Jews, to their idolatry, to their faithlessness, and he was stoned there. But also John the Baptist specifically, because that one was specifically dealing with morality, with rebuke and immoral behavior to the king himself. And, if we cannot say that John the Baptist was a martyr, then we probably cannot say that Charlie Kirk was a martyr. Of course, we don't doubt that John the Baptist was a martyr. He was preaching the gospel, and he was preaching the application of the gospel, the law of the kingdom. Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, also a good example. When he was rebuking and he was killed by the mob, he was rebuking the moral behavior also. So there's a variety of those examples in the Bible where we see. But those are the 8 reasons that I would say that believers and Christians, and especially Protestants, because he was unashamedly a Protestant. He was not identifying as a Catholic or as a some kind of spiritual guide, specifically Protestant believer, who said multiple times, the gospel is the point of what I'm doing. Everything else is peanuts. You can listen to Frank Turek's testimony, Christian apologist who was traveling and mentoring Charlie Kirk. And he will tell you that spreading of the gospel was the most important for him. And that's what he said. Everything else, politics, even though he was super knowledgeable about politics and economics and history and constitution and everything, he said all of that is peanuts compared to the gospel, to spreading of the gospel. And we see from his text messages with other people that he considered mentors, that he saw himself as becoming more and more as an evangelist, as an apologist and evangelist, more and more so than just a conservative. And it seems like sooner or later he would start losing some of that conservative base that wasn't Christian. It seems definitely like that to me, but especially once he became more and more clear on gay marriage, opposing to it. There's a lot of gays who are conservative, so gay marriage advocates, right? So we don't believe in gay marriage, of course. We don't believe in that terminology even as believers, but he was coming along on those questions, and it's also important to understand. He was 31. He was a lot more, he grew up in a church that wasn't maybe theologically extremely solid in many ways. He was super knowledgeable about everything else. He was a genius in real sense, I think. He was going through his maturity in terms of his spiritual development. It's recorded he said that I am becoming a defender of the faith, even though I didn't ask for it. It looks like God is giving me that. So that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to do great, in a great capacity, in a great way. So that's just kind of a couple of my thoughts about it, about what happened. Super tragic, very sad. And yet I think we should claim him as ours. We should claim him as one of ours, as one of our martyrs, celebrate him, look at him as an example, imperfect, and still maturing, growing, clarifying things. He had a lot of mentors around him because he wanted to become better at defending the faith. But he definitely saw this as his main calling moving forward. So those are some of my thoughts, and I think we should celebrate the life and the death of Christian martyr Charlie Kirk.